If you're someone that loves animation, this episode attempts to give you an overview of the process, right? Starting with the different types of animation that exist, because there are quite a number of styles that are out there that might not immediately come to mind. And then afterwards, give you an overview of the various steps from beginning to the final product. So let's begin by giving the overview of the types of animation that exist. The one that may come to mind first and foremost is the hand-drawn animation style. Examples of this type of style are Lion King, Akira, and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. In traditional animation, each frame is drawn by hand on paper, hence the name hand-drawn animation, or in today's case, on digital tablets. This style involves drawing each movement frame by frame, which is later photographed and compiled into a sequence. The strengths of this animation style include that it has a rich, organic, and fluid animation. Each frame can be uniquely detailed and expressive. But of course, the challenge is that it's time-consuming and labor-intensive due to the sheer number of drawings required. The second animation style that might immediately come to mind is the more traditional nowadays 3D animation, which of course Pixar is totally known for, right? Beginning with Toy Story and now with everything that they've built since that movie. 3D animation involves creating the footage within a computer and rendering it out over time. Now, it doesn't mean it's any less intensive than the hand-drawn animation. You just have the ability of a computer to be able to do it, and as evidenced by Pixar's own work, it started off very bare bones, and now where we are today, the level of detail that can go into 3D animation is very immense. Now, beyond those two immediate ones that come to mind, there is also rotoscope animation. Notable examples of rotoscope are things such as Richard Linklater's Waking Life, as well as A Scanner Darkly, and one of my favorite TV shows, Amazon's Undone. This type of animation involves tracing over live action footage, frame by frame, to create a more realistic animation. It gives the animation a lifelike quality while maintaining an artistic flair. Now, the challenges are that it's still time consuming and there's a reliance on live action, which can limit the creative flexibility of an artist. Another animation style is the cutout animation style, which was the bread and butter of early South Park seasons. Cutout animation involves creating characters and objects out of materials like paper, fabric, or digital images, and then moving and animating them frame by frame. This technique can either be done physically or digitally. Now, the strengths are that it's quick to produce and easy to modify, making it ideal for shows with tight deadlines. The challenges, however, are that there's a limited fluidity of movement and the characters often look more stiff compared to traditional hand-drawn animation. Next, we have the digital vector-based animation style, which Rick and Morty, the TV show, is most known for. With this animation style, images are created using mathematical points, lines, and curves. This allows for smooth scaling and manipulation without losing quality. Digital tools like Adobe Animate are commonly used in this style. And the strengths are that it's scalable without loss of quality, the production is faster, and they are easy to reuse for assets like character rigs. Now, the challenges are that it can sometimes lack the organic, handcrafted feel of traditional animation. And then, of course, there is stop motion animation, which is one of my favorite animation styles. The two that are most known with this style is, of course, Coraline, as well as Tim Burton's A Nightmare Before Christmas. In stop motion, flat materials such as paper or fabric are moved incrementally between frames, creating the illusion of motion when played in sequence. And the strengths are that it's a highly tactile and unique animation style that offers a handcrafted feel that's both whimsical and artistic. But the challenges are that you're limited to non-fluid movements and it requires great precision in setting up each shot. A lesser used style of animation is the silhouette animation, but you may remember this animation style from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. This animation style was used within that movie to highlight a backstory of the Deathly Hallows themselves. Now, what it is, it's a type of cutout animation that involves creating characters and scenes as black silhouettes, often against a backlit surface. It's minimalist and visually striking. So the strengths are that it's an effective way to tell a story with minimal detail, but of course you're limited in terms of the range of expression due to the lack of detail that you obviously get with a silhouette. Then we have the anime style, which is technically a subgenre of animation, but I'm going to pick it because it has such an influence in the world of animation today. And the ones that certainly come to mind are from Studio Ghibli, so The Boy and the Heron most recently. But then, of course, you have things like Suzume and Your Name and other wonderful, wonderful animes that exist. The reason why I wanted to highlight it, even though it is technically a subcategory, is that anime uses a variety of techniques, but it is characterized by highly stylized character designs with limited animation in certain sequences, holding still on a detailed background or character shot. And it also has expressive close-ups. This often blends dynamic movement with economic use of frames. And the strengths of this style are that it focuses on highly detailed backgrounds, expressive close-ups, and nuanced facial expressions. And so it's a strong balance between action and stillness. However, the challenges are that your limited frame animation can be noticeable during slower sequences. Then we have the more corporate animation style, which is motion graphics. And I say the more corporate style because they are most used in promotional explainer videos. They are typically used for infographics, using shapes, text, and images to explain concepts. And it often uses keyframe animation and is driven by software such as After Effects. And the strength of it is that it's clean, professional, and excellent for explainer videos or presentations. But the challenges are that it often lacks emotional storytelling, so therefore it is best suited for non-narrative purposes. Limited animation is another type of animation, most notably the Flintstones and Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And the reason why it's called limited animation is because instead of drawing every frame, limited animation uses fewer frames and relies on techniques like panning backgrounds and also dialogue over static characters or moving only certain body parts to save time and resources. And based on that, you can probably tell that its strength is that it's faster and more economical than full animation, especially for TV production. But the challenge is that it can appear less fluid or dynamic compared to full traditional animation. Next, we have the hybrid 2D, 3D animation style, which is wonderfully exemplified in the classic The Iron Giant. As the name implies, this combines 2D characters and backgrounds with 3D elements or effects, merging the strengths of both animation styles. This adds depth and complexity while maintaining the aesthetic of 2D animation. However, it requires skilled artists and technology to blend both styles seamlessly. Of course, we have the experimental animation style as well, which by definition is a little bit harder to pin down, but an example of one such experimental animation style is The Old Man and the Sea. This category of animation includes any unconventional techniques, often blending various mediums such as painting, collage, and photography, or manipulating materials in unusual ways. The goal is to create unique visual effects or styles not seen in any of these other styles of animation. Now, the strengths are that it allows for high creativity, artistic freedom, and often results in visually stunning and thought-provoking work. But the challenges are, because it's highly specialized, it's not always suitable for commercial purposes and requires a deep understanding of various art formats. A fun animation style is paint on glass. This style involves painting images on glass or other transparent surfaces and manipulating the paint frame by frame. It's a highly tactile process, producing a fluid, dreamlike quality in the animation. And its strengths are that it is very beautiful, highly expressive, and has a strong artistic look. But the challenges, of course, are that it's extremely labor-intensive, as it requires the animator to paint and alter the image between every frame. Similar to paint on glass, we have charcoal animation. Charcoal animation involves drawing and erasing images on paper, usually charcoal or pastel, allowing for fluid morphing and a distinct gritty aesthetic. The strength is that it has strong textural and atmospheric quality, perfect for moody or experimental storytelling. But the challenges are that it's very difficult to achieve given the precision and that it's time consuming. Now we get to cell animation, which the classic Disney film 101 Dalmatians is a wonderful example of this. It's a variation of traditional hand-drawn animation where animators draw on paper and then the drawings are transferred onto transparent sheets using a photocopy process rather than hand inking the outlines. The strengths are that it streamlines production, and especially during the 1960s and 70s for Disney, it helped reduce time and effort spent on inking. But the challenges are that it gave the animation a rougher, sketchy feel that some found less appealing compared to more polished hand ink styles. One of the earliest forms of animation was actually called rubber hose animation. So think of Steamboat Willie. This style is characterized by characters with bendy, rubber-like limbs and exaggerated cartoony movements. The strength is that it's lighthearted, exaggerated movements are perfect for slapstick humor. However, it holds limited realism, and the characters and the movements are highly stylized and not grounded in natural motion. And last, but certainly not least, we have the sand animation style. This is where animators create images with sand on a backlit surface, shifting the particles to alter shapes and figures frame by frame. It results in a fluid, grainy visual style that's often dreamlike or abstract. If you're looking to check out this animation style, the Sand Castle from 1977 is a wonderful example of sand animation. So those are the different types of animation styles that exist out there today. Now, examining an animated feature film, most tend to have around 1,200 to 1,500 shots. In terms of the non-3D animation styles, the common frame rates tend to be either 24 frames per second or 12 frames per second. Most animated movies actually utilize both, where if it's 24 frames per second, it means that every frame is unique, resulting in the smoothest motion. And if it's 12 frames, one drawing is held for 2 frames, so you get 12 drawings per second. Now, I say they blend these because where some scenes like fast action are animated using the ones technique, where every frame is uniquely drawn with fluid motion, while slower scenes will utilize twos, where you draw 1 frame for every 2 frames, and that reduces the workload. As a general rule of thumb, more frames equals smoother motion. Once you've established all these various things that you're trying to create, you get into the actual animation process. And the first step of the animation process is the storyboard phase. The purpose of this phase is to visualize the script representing planned shots, action, camera angles, and dialogue. The process involves artists creating rough sketches and panels noting movements and dialogue. Once the storyboards are created, all of them are put in what is called an animatic, which is all the storyboards laid out with timed dialogue, rough sound effects, maybe some temporary music, and the idea is to start to visualize the whole movie strung together, especially for timing and pacing purposes. Once the animatic has been locked in, you get into what's called the layout phase. In this phase, you're only drawing one single frame to represent the entirety of the shot. So if you want to think of it in any way, it's a more specific storyboard, right? It gets into more of the finer details that were roughly represented with the storyboard. In the next phase, called key poses, this is where you start to define the major movements and expressions within that particular shot. These are the most critical frames that establish the start, end, and main actions of the various characters and whatever else is going on within that. And the animators draw these key poses that depict the most important actions and changes in expression. They are the foundation of each of those shots, setting the timing and movement for the entire shot itself. Once the key pose of a shot has been approved, you're ready for the in-betweening. In-betweens fill the gaps between key poses, creating smooth motion and transitions. This step brings the animation to life by making the movements fluid. Animators, often junior or assistant animators, create the drawings that connect the key poses together. The number of in-betweens determines the smoothness of the animation. Remember, this means whether it's 12 frames or if it's actually the full 24 frames. Once the in-betweens have been created for a shot, it is ready for coloring. This portion gives the animation its final visual look, adding details like color, shading, and texture for each of the frames. Colorists will fill in the character and background drawings with the appropriate colors, ensuring consistency throughout the animation. Digital tools are often used to streamline this process today. Once complete with the coloring phase, we are ready for compositing. This section brings together all the visual elements of a shot, the characters, the backgrounds, the effects, ensuring that everything works harmoniously. And it involves artists using software to layer in all the different elements, adjusting them to create the final image. This step often includes adding effects like shadows, lighting, and even camera movements. With compositing complete, it is ready for the shading process. Shading adds depth and dimension to the animation by applying shadows and highlights, making the characters and backgrounds look more realistic. The process involves artists applying techniques to emphasize the light source and the depth of the scene, enhancing the overall visual impact. Once this is complete, we are ready for the final check and render of a shot. As implied in this portion, you ensure that all the elements are in place and that the animation is ready for output. Everything was reviewed frame by frame to catch any errors or inconsistencies. Once everything is improved, it is ready to be rendered, producing the final video files. Next up, we have the sound design and mixing process. This involves adding the final audio elements, including dialogue, sound effects, and music to enhance the storytelling. Sound designers mix and synchronize the audio with the final animation, ensuring that everything matches perfectly. The final mix is then integrated with the animation. I should point out that a sound designer, mixer, and composer can all be working simultaneously throughout all these various phases, but it isn't until this phase of it that you get the truest timing of all the various elements for things such as footsteps, right? Whereas before you had them placed in, but now you time it exactly to the final animation. So that's why it's pointed out here, but it can be done and started throughout the whole process. It's just finalized in this phase of it. Once that is complete, we are ready for the final output. This is the completed animation that is then prepped for distribution, whether film, television, or online platforms. It is exported out in the required format or formats, ensuring that it meets the technical specs for its intended platform. So there you have it. These are the nuts and bolts that go into the animation process from start to finish. If you have any questions or thoughts of your own that you'd like to share, please comment down below. I would love to continue the conversation there. As intended, this is meant to be very educational, and so, as much as I've tried to jam pack in here, of course, there are tons of things that I could not include. This is meant as a brief overview, but I would love to continue the conversation in the comments. And likewise, build an even more in-depth episode in the future to break down even, into more granular aspects of this entire process. Thank you for taking the time to tune in. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.